G'day, Keithy here. Thanks for joining me. So today we're off to Maytown and the Palmer River Goldfields area. Come along for the ride. It's going to be an adventure, this one.
So Maytown, far north Queensland. A lot of you might be asking where it is. Well, that's Australia you see right there. If we zoom on in, you can see Townsville is where I live and Maytown's up in the far north. It's basically the start of Cape York. It's about 700 kilometres from Townsville. It's an easy drive up for about the last 70 k's being a dirt road, a lovely dirt road into Maytown. And then after Maytown you begin the old coach road, and that's where we're headed today. So for this trip, I've led 9 vehicles from the Roving Around 4x4 Club of varying makes and models, and we even had a camper trailer in there. We all met up in Townsville and had a relatively easy drive. A little bit of rain in the tablelands as we went through. We ended up camping in the lagoon for the night just before. So for those of you asking, how do I get to Maytown? It's about 30 kilometres south of the Palmer River Roadhouse is where you'll turn off the highway and begin your dirt road trek. It's about 70 kilometres of dirt. It winds through the hills all the way to the Palmer River, and then you're pretty much at Maytown from there. It's about 5 kilometres in from the Palmer River crossing itself. As you can see here, it's a very lovely view at the lagoon we camped at the night before we did Maytown and the old coach road. What do you need to get in there? So you'll need a four-wheel drive for beginners, good tyres, all-terrain tyres. You don't necessarily need a suspension lift, although if you are going to do the old coach road after you've been through Maytown, I highly recommend a 2-inch suspension lift, and I don't recommend towing heavy trailers through there. As you've probably seen in my previous video up the top there, I've got Lieutenant Dan that I drag around behind me to fit all of the camping gear necessary for our trips away. And that's okay because it's a very light trailer all up with all the camping gear, and it probably only weighs, 450, 500 kilos. So it's rather easy to tow. But if you have got a camper trailer or a caravan that weighs any more than that, I'd suggest definitely don't take it through there. The road into Maytown is generally pretty good. As you can see here, they're doing some roadworks. So if you're going to camp or plan to camp at or near Maytown, I'd advise doing a bit of Googling first, because there are permits required to camp at the Palmer area at Dogleg before you get to Maytown. It's pretty much at Maytown, the Palmer River. So you'll need to do some Googling for that. Anyway guys, sit back and enjoy some footage. I've got footage here from other members of the club from the trip. Thank you very much for allowing me to use those clips and photos, guys. I really appreciate it. There's only so much that I can get on one trip, but obviously with everyone else taking photos and filming as well, we got quite a lot here. So I'll get back to you when we get to the old coach road in Maytown for a bit more talk. As you pull into Maytown, you'll be greeted with a lovely sign such as this. There's also another sign. And when you get there, you'll find the monument in the main street, essentially like a roundabout at Maytown. So Maytown itself was a mining town, and it was started in the 1800s and ended up finishing up in the early 1900s. And by the end of the life of this, there was only mostly Chinese people left around, but in its heyday, it got up to around 40,000 people. You see there the cobblestone guttering along the town centre, and if you keep following that along, there are ruins from some of the hotels and the bakery and etc. in town. It's definitely worth having a look at that. Along your drive to Maytown, you'll find Queen Mill, Comet Mill, Louisa Mine. There's a few mines, open shafts, and a lot of ruins to have a look at. It's well worth pulling in there to have a look. And what you're seeing now is at the start of the old coach road. So the 9 vehicles in our convoy all aired down. If you're going to do this old coach road, I highly recommend you air the tyres right down. I was at 17 pounds in the front, and I think it was about 24 in the back, obviously because of the weight in the back of the car. If you're going to do the old coach road, I'd recommend you give yourself a full day to do it. It's not a quick drive. It's about 75 kilometres of what you're seeing in front of you there, and it's low range for the entire duration. It's also pretty hot up here, so I would recommend that if you're going to do it in the later parts of the year, take plenty of water and make sure the cooling system in your car is actually in good condition. Because tracks like this, especially the slow, low range that you're seeing here, take quite a toll on everything, especially yourself. You need to make sure you keep hydrated. Now the old coach road, what you're seeing here, I actually managed to pop an air spring, I think 2010 or 11. You'll see the video up the top right there on this very hill. And it doesn't look steep in the video, and the video is not going to do this track justice. No matter how many times you look at it, you are not going to get an actual perception for how steep and how rough this track is. Now this is not an easy track, and this is where I recommend you have solid all-terrain tyres and at least 2 inches of suspension lift. You don't need a competition truck to do it. We had an Amarok in our convoy, and he had just good tyres on that, no suspension lift, but he did have bash plates. And there were a couple of times where his bash plates actually made contact with some of the rocks. Didn't damage the vehicle at all. Luckily, he did have the bash plates though. So this is a very hard, very steep track. I'd actually rate it as the hardest track in Australia. And it's not hard in the sense that you need a competition truck to drive it. It's hard in the sense that it is rough and it's taxing on a vehicle. There is no track in Australia that has this degree of difficulty, of terrain, than the old coach road. There are tracks that are rough and require, lockers and this and that. You'll get through the old coach road without a locker if you do some really good wheel placement in some of the areas. As you see there, Rod just drove his Toyota up a hill with the camper trailer on, so it is doable. But yeah, advised not to take a camper trailer through here because it was very hard on his vehicle and his camper trailer to get through that. And given the time that it takes to get through there, it just makes it that little bit longer when you take a camper trailer through, so don't do that. If you can, I'd camp at the Palmer River Roadhouse the night before, and I'd begin Maytown in the old coach road, and then return to the Palmer if I had the time to do it. That is if you have caravans and convoys, or camper trailers, in your convoy. Again, no video is actually going to demonstrate how rough and how steep this is, so you can see Don's Amarok there. He's coming down a steep hill right now. And this is a classic example of what you're going to come across on the old coach road. There's lots of rocky, rutted sections. And again, this is where good tyre pressures and good tyres come in very handy because you can only do low range first gear type speeds through a lot of this track. Never underestimate this track. It is extremely rough and it is extremely hard. Nothing beyond a vehicle without lockers. As long as you have good tyres and a little bit of suspension travel, you'll get through it unscathed. None of the vehicles on this convoy actually had any damage afterwards other than the bash plate on this Amarok, but luckily it wasn't significant damage. So you can see Rob there having a go as well. He's got a very well decked out patrol. He did a lovely job through this trip. It's funny actually because he had a roast cooking while he was driving along. He's got one of those camp ovens in there. It's absolutely amazing. Made everyone so jealous when he pulled up to camp and he already had dinner ready in the back of his patrol. So what you're seeing now is one of the hills along the coach road, and that's my Range Rover towing Lieutenant Dan there. And I'm going nice and steady here, low range first, just idling up. I can't remember if I had the locker on or not, but this is really washed out and you'll be able to see if you have a go at it now. Just another example of some of the things that you'll come across in the old coach road. And there goes Darren's 60 series, Shop 60 series. What a wonderful vehicle that is. There's a couple of options on this track here. So the one on the far right, which we're doing here, is what you would call probably medium difficulty out of all of these options. There's one slightly to the left of where Darren is now that you would definitely require lockers on if you were going to have a go at that. There's one slightly to the left of that again, which I don't think you'd attempt unless you had a comp truck. And then you'll see the line that Andrew's going to take here, which is a relatively easy, little rocky climb. And you'll get through that one with no worries at all. Quite a nice little climb up there, just slow and steady and take your time. And that's the theme on the old coach road. If you're going to take it, you're going to need to pick your lines and you're going to need to go slow and steady, because the faster you go, the more likely you are to do damage to your vehicle. So if you're going to do the old coach road, give yourself a full day from start to finish to do the old coach road, and just be prepared if something happens to one of the vehicles in your convoy to repair it, and possibly even camp along the track somewhere if you have to. There's not a lot of spots. Towards the northern section of the old coach road, there's a couple of spots where you could camp a few vehicles. You probably get 5 or 6 vehicles in there if you had to. It's not ideal camping, but it's a flat area where you can probably park a few vehicles up with tents and whatnot to spend the night if you had to. Enjoy the rest of the footage, guys, and I'll get back to you to make the finish the old coach road. This signifies the end of the old coach road. We ended up camping at Lakeland for the night, and then we'd planned to do the Creb track from there, but unfortunately due to the weather and there was a few vehicles actually stuck on the Creb track, we couldn't do that, so we decided that we were going to take the Bloomfield to get back to the Daintree and camp there for the night before heading back to Townsville the next day. For those of you keen on the Creb track, which we didn't do on this trip, I actually went up there a fortnight later with pretty much all of the vehicles that attended the Maytown trip, and we did the Creb track. That's in a video that you'll see next. Beautiful track. The Bloomfield's also an easy track. You will take that with a camper trailer, no worries. Wouldn't recommend taking a caravan on it, although you could do it. There are some very steep ascents and descents. The one you see here, I'm actually in low range coming down this hill. Again, it doesn't look like it, and there's no camera that's actually going to show you how steep some of these hills are, some of these climbs and hills, etc. So just be careful when you are taking the Bloomfield as well. It's probably a good idea to take your time. These hills and the terrain can change rather quickly, especially if you've got another vehicle coming towards you. Sometimes there's potholes and whatnot. Otherwise, a lovely drive. So from the Bloomfield, we stayed in the Daintree, and then we took the Captain Cook Highway down through Cairns back to Townsville. So you're going to see some footage from that coming up soon. I'll let you enjoy the rest of the show, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here, if you like following along with some of the trips that I do, some of the things that I do to the vehicles, and general hints and banter. So we've got the Creb Track coming up in a couple of days' time, and be keen for that as well. It's a great video, it was a great trip, and there's plenty more to come. Stay safe, take care, and thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time. Here you'll see the Daintree River. So if you were going to take the Creb Track heading north, you would cross this river. We just came across it in the barge, as you've seen by the photos just before. And this is filmed from Rod and Deb's Land Cruiser. Seeing as we couldn't do the Creb Track because it was too wet, we thought we'd at least go and drive the Daintree River and have a little bit of a look up there. A fantastic end to a trip. Only a couple of us decided to do the Daintree River drive, just to see what it was all about, and it gave us a bit of a taste for the want to do the Creb Track again. So the following weekend, Rod and Deb actually went up and did the Creb Track with another gentleman on the trip, Tony. And you'll see here, this is from my car, crossing the Daintree again, the opposite direction. What a wonderful trip that was. It was a great bunch of people that were with us. It was a fantastic trip, and I'd do that again in a heartbeat. Thanks to everyone who came along. Thanks to you for watching. Really appreciate it, supporting me, getting these videos out there for you. I'd love nothing more than to share what I can of this country with you. Stay tuned for more, guys, and I'll catch you next time.